And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 145th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, June 9th, 2020, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, Nathan is coming up with awesome ideas the past couple of basically over the last month. A lot of the ideas have come from him, and he was like, hey, why don't we have since we've wanted to talk about football, why don't we have an IU football fantasy football draft? And to make it simple, just kind of do the Bill Lynch era to present day. So we're going to do an IU football fantasy draft from since 2007 all the way to fantasy day. So present day. So we're going to have 8 rounds. It's going to be 1 QB, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, a kicker, and 1 defense. So like fantasy football in the NFL, you get like the Bears defense or the Eagles defense or the Steelers defense. And yes, I shouted out all 3 of our teams, but you get like one whole defense. So I thought, hey, let's just do like 1 year's defense. So like the 2010 defense or the 2007 defense is your defense that you pick basically. And at least as of for the defensive perspective, there's going to probably be some overlap with specific players, but the defense has still kind of looked a little different between the past 4 or 5 years since Tom Allen has kind of started to run the ship. But we're going to do a snake draft order. I did a randomized thing. I even sent a picture just to show that it was random. It's going to be Nathan, Noah, Matt, and then we're going to snake around. And the last caveat is just that we're talking about collegiate careers. So yes, NFL careers might play some sort of influence in some of our decisions, but as we know, some really good collegiate players can sometimes not produce in the NFL. So just the collegiate careers that these players had at Indiana University. But let's get on with it. So here with me tonight, as I have sort of mentioned, Matt and Nathan. Let's kick it over to Nathan first because we're starting 15 minutes late. If you usually watch us live, Nathan's like, hey, about 5 minutes before we started, he's like, hey, can I have a delay? There's kind of a tornado coming our way. So Nathan, did you get blown off? And are you kind of doing or are you kind of doing the Wizard of Oz thing and just seeing some red slippers?
No Wizard of Oz action here. It was all good. You know, we just hunkered down in the basement and now we're all right. And now it's time for this fantasy draft, which I have no idea how this is going to go. I mean, we've never done this before. And the best part about this is like, there are no mocks. You know what I'm saying? And like for the real NFL draft or for real fantasy football drafts, you've got mocks to look at because smart expert people, or so they call themselves, put those together. And then you and your friends compare it to those mocks. Well, there are no mocks here. So I don't know if one person's going to end up with a really good team or we're all just going to have equally good. I mean, I have no idea, but I think it's going to be close when it's all said and done. Yeah, I think that's my guess. But
I mean,
this is going to be fun.
I've got like my draft boards like here printed and everything. I did some research today, and I feel like especially since a lot of us who probably weren't like really into the football, at least Indiana football during the Bill Lynch era, and maybe at the beginning of Kevin Wilson's era, there's kind of some players that if you weren't a diehard fan, you might have kind of forgotten about some of these players. Yes, Matt's pointing to himself, and that was also me. So I had to do some research before to kind of look at it. But yeah, no mock drafts. We're gonna head right into it. Matt, how are you feeling before the clock has started?
I'm feeling terrified because a lot of the names I went and looked up on here, and I was like, I know that name, but I don't remember watching this person. So I've been quickly looking through statistics on them and then also looking at some highlight videos real fast and just like kind of refresh my memory on who they are. Because there's a lot of people, like remember Bill Lynch era, 2007, I was like 10 years old when the start of the Bill Lynch era. So yep. Excuse me if I don't know who a couple of the people are on this draft board.
Okay, and since this is a live draft, just for like maybe potential awkward pauses, we've never done this before. I know we obviously all have to type in. Nathan's going to be frantically typing in like our picks and which rounds and stuff and crossing off players so we don't do it again. I'm going to try and make sure that things are kind of running smoothly. We want to try and talk a little bit about some players, but just kind of on the fly. So we're going to try and make it as professional as possible. But here's to hoping that it's going to go smoothly. And there's going to be no real clock. We're just going to kind of be like, hey, Nathan, give us a player. player. Maybe he thinks about it for a second. It's just going to be obviously, since there's no money at stake or anything, it's not even a season that we're going to have with these fantasy drafts. We're just going to kind of go for it, and we will do our normal Who Won the Week social media shout out, all that kind of stuff in the middle. So I'll kind of pause the draft in between some things. So let's get started. And as Roger Goodell would say, there's no team name. So Nathan, you are now on the clock for the first pick in the 2020 Bill Lynch era to present IU Fantasy Football Players Draft. We need to have an acronym for that, just 2 sentences for an acronym. But Nathan, you've had the first pick. Are you going to be one of those NFL teams that's going to wait 10 minutes to pick their first pick, or are you just going to it's going to go for it right away?
No, I'm just going to go for it. I kind of knew who my pick was going to be for about 2.5 hours now, and it's going to be Tevin Coleman. Okay, it's running back. Basically, Indiana's closest shot at a Heisman Trophy over the last decade. He was awesome to watch. I was able to watch him in person. He's fast. He's from the Chicagoland area. So, you got to tip your cap to Kevin Wilson for his recruiting ability to nab him and to play him at IU. But, it's interesting. Coleman's first couple of years, he was kind of in a timeshare situation and then really had his big season in year 3 before going to the NFL. He averaged over 7 yards a carry at IU. So yeah, not sure if that's a shocker, but Tevin Coleman's going first.
I don't think so. And I think it's probably not very much of a shocker for the pick I'm going for, because if you are a fantasy football nut, typically you don't really start with like the QB right away. So I'm just kind of explaining for those people that might not do fantasy football very much, because it's all about points and yardage and stuff. And yeah, QBs get you a lot of stuff, but you want to get those flex players, those running backs and receivers kind of first off the board, just because they're a little more scarce with at least some of the caliber of points that they can get you. So and we are going to do it with no flex players, so just 2 running backs, 2 receivers to make it more simple. And when we post it, we don't have to have 20,000 characters to kind of say our team. So second pick, no thinking about it. I wasn't even trying to stall. Jordan Howard, basically the guy right behind Tevin Coleman. Not everything Nathan said is basically just move it over to Jordan Howard, although we only got to see 1 year of him technically at Indiana. He did the same kind of stuff. He'd had the same kind of career at UAB right before coming over to Indiana. I mean, technically, if you add all those yards together, he had more total yards than Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman rushed for less carries, but had about the same amount of touchdowns, just about the same amount of receiving yards. So definitely going with Jordan Howard. And I think if he even got to Indiana just a year earlier, I think that final year that he had before going to the NFL probably would have even had close to that kind of 2,000 yard season that Tevin Coleman had. So I'm going to add Jordan Howard to as our first pick. All right, Matt, you've got two on the clock, the first round pick and the snake draft. So you're the first pick of the second round. So who are your back-to-back picks?
Sure. So my first one, I'm going to go with the trend that has been running backs and pick a third running back in a row. This one is not one that I was able to watch play at IU, but somebody that I know from the NFL, and that is Marcus Thigpen. I'm going to go with Marcus Thigpen with the third pick. Look, he finished finished second in school history on kickoff return, so I have that going for me. He also has 4,658 career all-purpose yards, and he's 8th in touchdowns for the school. He's also the first player in school history with over 1,000 rushing yards and receiving yards and kick return yards. So I'm going to go with Marcus Thigpen for an all-around weapon out of my backfield. And then, because there's not many quarterbacks in this draft, and I know you've been talking about going position players, but I feel like I can get good quality position players later on. I'm going to go with Nate Sudfeld, my boy, Philadelphia Eagles. He's I think the only proven quarterback to lead a team to 6 wins in a season in this draft. And so I'm going to go with Nate Sudfeld. The Philadelphia Eagles bias is pretty apparent. I want somebody to be throwing to Marcus Thigpen in the flat, and that's going to be Nate Sudfeld for me.
Love the Thigpen pick. I actually thought that would be more of a sleeper pick. I didn't think he was probably one of those picks that if we had a big board that he'd be farther down on the list because of that receiving threat, Matt, that you talked about. And especially in fantasy football, if you get those guys that are like Christian McCaffrey, that's why he gets you so many points, because they get that receiving threat with the running back. They're basically a receiver with that. So I love that pick. I'll go. And then Nathan, you can kind of, when it's your turn, we'll just kind of talk about some of the picks. And Matt going with the QB early. So I'm going to go with my next pick as wide receiver James Hardie. And if you don't know much about him, he's the all-time wide receiver yards leader for Indiana, as well as receptions and touchdowns. He did this all in 3 years too. So if you if he's the all-time leader in just 3 years as well, that's the key. It's the kind of caliber receiver that you have, even though maybe he might not be kind of the like Cody Latimer or Shane Wynn type of maybe bigger name that we've heard of recently. But if you got a guy that's doing all that kind of stuff, I don't need to talk much more about that. I mean, he got 36 touchdowns in 3 years. That's 1 touchdown per game. We got 12 games. Didn't go to many bowl games back then, so that's 1 touchdown per game at least, and you want that consistency. So definitely that's going to be my wide receiver pick at the top of my second round.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. We've got a comment in the chat here from Ari who's talking about Howard versus Coleman. And now, Matt, you didn't pick Howard or Coleman.
Right.
What are your thoughts as far as which guy you would take? Ari makes some interesting points. He says, hey, Howard had just 1 year. Coleman was more boom or bust. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm taking Coleman. I mean, it's pretty obvious what he's done in the NFL. If you want to use that as a kind of like looking at what like a series of work. But I mean, at the same time, like Nathan said, he was a Heisman candidate, and that team wins 0 games without Tevin Coleman. And so I think even though he was on a bad team, like they had a not so great defense. They lost Sudfeld to an injury, and he was people were loading the box. They had Xander Diamont at quarterback, who for the memes, it was a fantastic player for IU, and I miss the Xander with the cigar memes. But as far as playing on the field goes, Xander was not a Big Ten quarterback. So I'm going to give it to Tevin Coleman, though I can see the case for Jordan Howard. And again, as an Eagles fan, I know a soft spot for Jordan Howard. So.
That's okay. Yeah. I'll go with Jordan Howard with what Ari said, because that was my pick.
I love it. And also shout out to Ravi, who's in the chat, one of my good friends. There's also so now I've got 2 picks coming up, and there's some interesting talent available. I don't know if I'm going to go QB yet. It's a pretty deep position. I'm going to take one of my wide receivers. I'm going to go with Shane Wynn. Shane Wynn played under Kevin Wilson as well. And it's interesting with some of these players. You talk about Sudfeld and Coleman and Howard. Those guys, as great as they were, they didn't really play every down or every snap for 3 or 4 years. And you kind of look back in hindsight and go, I wonder what would have happened if they weren't in a timeshare situation. But I'm going to take Wynn. I mean, he had 20 receiving touchdowns at IU in his time there, a ton of receptions. And if our IU football fantasy league is a PPR or even half PPR league, I'd love getting the reception points with Shane Wynn. So I'm going to take him. He had almost 200 catches during his time at IU. So he's going to be my pick there. The second one, man, I don't know. This is gonna have to think about this for a second. I don't know if I want to.
That's okay. I mean, you've got. I like the Shane Wynn pick, and like you said, with the receptions, he's at 189 receptions. Touchdowns is not like incredible over 4 years, but it's still something that's at least a threat there. And I mean, he's got basically 2,200 yards. I like it. Tied for 3rd in touchdowns, actually. So compared to everyone else, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I'm going to double down at receiver. I'm going to go with Cody Latimer. So I'm going to go back-to-back picks with my wideouts. Latimer had a really good career at IU. You talk about over 2,000 receiving yards, 17 touchdown receptions. I remember both of his 3 touchdown games at IU. One was a home game against Iowa. Another one was a home win over Illinois. Both of them, which IU won. which is always nice to see when you get the individual production, you get the win as well. Latimer had he had a really nice chemistry with Nate Sudfeld and with whoever was the quarterback. He's going through a little bit of a tough time right now in the NFL, but we're not going to talk about that. I'm going to make Cody Latimer my third round pick.
All right, since I'm up next and then it'll snake around to Matt, I don't need to take a quarterback since Matt just got a quarterback and we're only doing one. So Matt, he's not going to get a quarterback, so I don't need to do that. And I'm going to end up going with Penix later. So since he's a running threat, I'm going to go at receiver again, so I can double down on receiver since I got a running threat as well. And I'm going to go with Whop Phillier. A guy that obviously doesn't hit Matt should have his mic on. He was like, dang it, I was probably going to take Whop Phillier. A guy that obviously doesn't currently, as of the time of recording this podcast, have the statistics of the guys we have already mentioned. But Whop Phillier, 3 years going on 4. And if he has that final year and he has even just a duplicate, if not as crazy as him just getting better from last year, if he just duplicates what he did last year, and there's no sense in thinking that he won't even get like close to duplicating next year, he's going to be the all-time receptions leader at Indiana University for the wide receiver position. So like Nathan said, even if it's like a little bit PPR, you've got all those receptions. He's got basically 1,500 receiving yards currently, which he had 1,000 this year. So you add that, he gets into the top basically 5 or 6 all-time of IU receivers. After everyone watching the 2019 season, I don't think I need to talk too much about selling anyone on Whop Phillier. So I'll kick it over to Matt since he's got to rethink. I know he's been clicking around his computer trying to figure out who his next pick is going to be. So Matt, who are you gonna take? Because you've gotten you've gotten a running back and a quarterback. So now you're gonna have to figure out who your receivers are going to be.
Yeah, I need people to throw to. Or I need people for Nate Sudfeld to throw to. So I'm going to take with this pick, Simi Cobbs. Sophomore year, Simi Cobbs was and played with Sudfeld, was fantastic in that bowl year. So give me Simi Cobbs with that pick. He had, I'm trying to pull up his stats real fast. 1,000 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns, 17.3 yards average. Had 9 touchdowns. Again, he missed a year because he redshirted because he got injured in 2016 on the first play of the season. And so 3 years at IU and done. So give me Simi Cobbs 1,900 total yards receiving. And then for my second pick, I'm going to double up on running back, and I'm going to go with Stevie Scott, our current IU running back. We all know Stevie. I'm not going to rely on Marcus Thigpen to get me on those third short situations. I need a big, tough former linebacker to get those quick last inches for a first down. So give me Stevie Scott.
All right, coming back around to me, I'm going to take Penix just so I can get a QB off the board. And Nathan said it is a pretty deep draft, but I feel like between obviously Penix and Sudfeld, there is I think a gap between the next tier of quarterbacks. So I'm going to take the playmaker that we obviously have yet to see for a full season, but obviously I'm just going to say that we're going to assume that he's going to be perfect and ready this entire year next year. So I'm going to take Michael Penix as my QB. So I've got a running threat and a guy that can get the ball not just down the field, but can chuck it down for some of those long passes as well.
I love it. And Ari's making some good points in the chat here. That 07 team had a lot of interesting players on it. Tracy Porter, James Hardie, Kellan Lewis. Ari was just reminiscing about the football, that team that went to the Insight Bowl, I believe, and they lost to Oklahoma State. But that was the year Austin Starr kicked the game-winning field goal to beat Purdue. And he also mentioned something that slipped my mind for a minute there. James Hardie, who is one of Noah's early draft picks, one of the most accomplished receivers in IU football history, passed away recently. He passed away in 2017. Obviously, you can, at a young age. So it's tough to see that. But, on that note, I can tell you that Kellan Lewis will eventually be my quarterback pick. But I don't need to make that pick right now.
You got some time now.
So it's funny that Ari sort of teased that a little bit there. I'm gonna take Peyton Hendershot with my pick here, and I know that's gonna stick in Noah's craw a little bit, but I think Noah might be the president of the Peyton Hendershot.
Well, I might be seated
until up to the end of the 2019 football season. Right now, Hendershot's got a little situation going on behind
We're
the
just
scenes.
assuming the situation is going to be okay.
Well, funny you mentioned that. Tom Allen did have a conference call with a lot of reporters last Wednesday, and Hendershot, there's no real update on his status for those of you that are curious. Right now, he's still in a modified return to the team stage. So that's where he's at right now. But Hendershot's my pick here. We need a tight end. And honestly, when you look at the numbers, there are really three guys to consider at the tight end position. And I want to nab Hendershot. Last year, he was huge for IU, over 600 receiving yards. He reeled in 4 touchdowns. And you almost wonder if maybe he could have had a couple more. So I'm going to take Hendershot there.
I'm going to sneak in and even add, because that was my next pick if you didn't take him. But here's kind of what Peyton Hendershot, and everyone has kind of started to come on board with him. And I'm going to, every time I can, I'm going to reiterate that I was on the Peyton Hendershot fan club since literally his first game. And basically so in 2 years, he's had 785 yards. If he continues and gets that third and potentially depending on if he plays and obviously what his third season could look like. If he plays the next season or even 2 seasons, he could potentially literally have all-time tight end type of numbers in the NCAA. Let me give you just a couple tight ends in the NFL and what they did in college. Jason Witten, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. 3 years. In 3 years, he only had 1 more reception than Hendershot, 12 more yards, and 1 more touchdown. Jason Witten only had basically the exact same statistics in an entire extra year. Kyle Rudolph, 90 receptions, so just a tiny bit, about 10 or 15 over Hendershot. 1,000 yards, more or less, about 208 touchdowns, so 1 or 2 more touchdowns than Hendershot. Same thing, 3 years. Now you're going to compare to Gronk, who had one of the best collegiate tight end careers, and in 2 years, it's gonna be a big difference. But obviously, when you talk about Gronk and you talk about a tight end that was arguably the best tight end to ever play the game, as going on into the NFL, 75 receptions, where Hendershot's at 67 right now. Basically 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, which is twice the amount he has, and did that in 2 years. So if he's Hendershot, basically with obviously QBs that are not at the level that could get Gronk the ball, and like Nathan said, that probably should have had a couple more. If he's basically even within spitting distance of the kind of collegiate career Gronk had, whew. So I'm just backing up your own pick, Nathan.
Well, and that's why his availability for next year is going to be a really big deal. But to continue as we enter the 5th round of this draft, my pick is going to be Stephen Houston. I'm going to lock down my second running back pick. Stephen Houston's a guy that a lot of you may not be familiar with, but he had a career at IU where his usage rate was pretty high. Kevin Wilson seemed to really like Houston, who totaled over 2,300 rushing yards, but he almost had 700 receiving yards too. And he's a guy who didn't always get the limelight. Tevin Coleman, in a sense, you could say, stole it from him. The one season where Coleman had over 2,000 rushing yards, but Houston played 3 full seasons at IU and had over 700 rushing yards each of those years. And when you talk about his involvement in the passing game, he's my RB2. I'm feeling pretty good about this pick. It's Stephen Houston.
This is also going to be an interesting draft just because we have so few spots. It's kind of like the flex position would kind of change the way we're doing it, because I feel like Nathan would probably, if we had backup QBs, Nathan would have probably taken a QB before, and vice versa. Like, now that I'm the last one with a running back pick, I don't necessarily need to take a running back for a while, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I guess that's the only difference with this kind of draft. But Nathan, before I get, after you stole literally the next 2 picks that I would have had if I had the 2 more picks, because, yeah, like you said, Stephen Houston, man, he got the yards and the receiving yards too, and the receiving touchdowns. 4 receiving touchdowns as a running back is quite a fair amount for a collegiate running back, especially in a time where running backs are not being utilized like they are today. But before I get to my next pick, where is or who won the week this week, Nathan, as we are in the middle of our draft?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be who won the week. Maybe it's like to be determined if the Hoosiers won this week or lost it. But what I'm trying to get at here is there was news that came down recently, a couple days ago, that Justin Smith, the forward wingman at IU, who transferred after 3 years, chose Arkansas as his new home. Not sure if that was surprising to a lot of IU fans, but Smith, who averaged over 10 points a game, over 5 rebounds a game last year, is now going to play for the Razorbacks in the SEC. He made some interesting comments to Zag's blog, and that's a blog. The name of the Adam Zagoria, I believe, is the person who's sort of the chief writer. They're a very reliable journalist. Justin Smith made some interesting comments saying, hey, it maybe is best if I go to a school where they have a more freedom for the players as far as the system is concerned. He was excited to play in front of one of the most passionate fan bases in the SEC. So I don't know how much to read into that, but definitely interesting news. Arkansas's got a head coach in Eric Musselman who's got NBA experience. Of course, over the last couple years, Arkansas has won 2 out of 3 against IU, but the teams are not scheduled to play each other this coming season. So interesting move for Smith. He's not in the Big Ten, so Indiana's probably not going to face him, but definitely the biggest IU basketball news nugget over the course of the last week.
Yeah, I don't think that comment that Justin said to Adam Zagoria for Zag's blog was that weird, that he wanted to go play in a different system. I don't think IU basketball fans should take that as kind of like a jibe or anything at Archie Miller, because I do think when you look at Justin Smith as a player, he doesn't fit into the pack line on offense. On the defense, he's fine. You can fit pieces into the pack line defense. But as far as Archie's offensive system goes, I don't think Justin was going to be a fit next year. I don't think he ever was a fit for the system. And for him to go play for Eric Musselman out at Arkansas is a good opportunity for him.
Matt, how dare you tell IU fans not to overreact? Who do you think you are?
I know I'm preaching to the.
This is either the best
abyss.
thing to ever. It's either the best thing to ever happen, or it's the worst, and everyone in the program's screwed. It's one or the other.
That's the reason why he was leaving, was just so that he could probably be able to kind of show off and showcase his athletic talents, and that's a place, like he even said in the discussion, that it's a place where it's a more free form style. So that's makes sense where him specifically wanting to go. So we wish him all the best of luck. All right, my next pick, I'm going to make it pretty quick and brief. There's no guy to really match tight end numbers that Peyton Hendershot is even currently matching, and let alone what he is potentially going to do. But I'm going to take the name of again, Matt's making another face. I'm just ruining Matt's fantasy draft night. But I'm going to take the big name, take the guy that really didn't have a lot of numbers in college and wasn't there for very long. But I'm going to take the big name, the guy that's going to be the big man on campus in North Carolina. I'm going to go with Ian Thomas.
Good stuff, Noah.
Great
stuff.
Oh, man. I love that pick, though, because Thomas, for me at least, wins the award for the most underused player over the last decade plus.
Preach.
And I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Kellan Lewis was the offensive coordinator when Ian Thomas was a football player at IU. Yeah. But that is neither here nor there. No, I love it. And it also seems like, no, you're that guy in the fantasy draft, right? Who always takes the player you want before you go. So I might need to separate you and Matt here if things get any crazier.
Hey, you did. Hey, you took 2 of my picks in a back-to-back in a row.
True.
So
that's how it happens. That's
yeah,
how
right
it
now.
Happens.
Yeah, exactly. Matt's just not taking anyone that I need currently. So,
well, since you guys don't need a wide receiver or a tight end anymore, so you have both of those positions filled, and one needs a quarterback and one needs a running back. That means I get first choice of kicker and defense. So That's right. I'm using the 5th and 6th rounds on a kicker and defense because that's what this format has led to. So my first pick is going to be the 2017 IU defense. I need those points. I need those interceptions. Again, it's the highest ranked FPI defense that I found. I'm pretty sure it's higher than the 2007 ones, which was at 77. The Football Power Index on ESPN had the defense ranked at 31 overall for the 2017 defense. So that made it pretty easy for me. I think that's a couple spots ahead of the 2019 defense off the top of my head. So going with that defense first. And then for as far as kickers go, I'm going on brand recognition alone and moments. And I'm going with Austin Starr for his kick and game-winning field goal over Purdue. I know Griffin Oaks and Logan Justice both had really good careers, but I think when you see that Austin Starr name, it brings up very good memories, and I need happy thoughts in my life at this moment. So we're going to go with Austin Starr.
Interesting.
Man. I love it.
Kicker. I probably wouldn't even have drafted him besides just one memorable moment, basically.
I love
the monologue. That's a throwback.
I love the kicker and defense pick though, Matt. You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly where I have to go next, is because I don't necessarily need some of those other positions. So I mean, my next is going to be pick is going to be the defense. So Matt picked the 2017 defense, a defense that was very comparable to 2017, and I'm going to go with this past year's defense. And they didn't rate as high as 2017 per se, but their statistics were a lot better, and fantasy points are all based off of statistics. So I mean, the team itself 24.4 points gave up 24.4 points per game on average. Only gave up 213.7 passing yards, 138.8 rushing yards. You've got seniors like Alan Stallings, Jerome Johnson as a junior, DeMarcus Elliott coming up in his breakout year as a sophomore, Michael Ziemba and juniors on the front line. You've got like a senior like Roquan Jones right there, and then you've got the secondary that's just been a secondary that's old but also coming up within the ranks, where you've got a junior Marcelino Ball, Khalil Bryant, Raheem Lane. Obviously, of course, freshman Taiwan Mullen, Brian Fitzgerald. You've got all these guys that are basically becoming brand names, the second round of big brand names that are probably going to go on to having not just an NFL career, but at least start to even basically contend in the NFL and not just to try and root for a practice squad guy. So I'm going to go with the 2019 defense for my pick.
That's interesting, and Taiwan Mullen, that's my guy. I love Taiwan Mullen so much. The true freshman last year, he's going to go into a sophomore year next year. Ari, I feel like Ari's in the chat here, and I love his comments because I feel like he and I were on the same wavelength here for some of this stuff. So, Ari just made a comment that if there's one defense he was going to take before Tom Allen's era, it's the 2007 IU football defense, the team that made the bowl game. It had some very noteworthy players, and that's going to be my pick here, just to be clear, in case I don't want to get into any legal trouble. It's just to make it official. The 2007 defense is my pick. The headliner on that defense was Tracy Porter, who we all know is a guy who picked off Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, got a pick six there, a number of other interceptions in his NFL career. He was awesome at IU. He had 6 picks in the 2007 season. And Indiana, and remember, with fantasy football defense, you need the sacks, you need the turnovers. Indiana had a pair of bookend pass rushers in 2007, and you may not have heard of them or you may not remember them. And if you do, I tip my cap to you because you're a good fan. Jamie Curlew and Greg Middleton were a couple of guys who they really tallied up the sacks. Middleton had 16 sacks in 2007. I mean, and think, Indiana only played 13 games. 16 sacks, and Curlew added 4.5, but Curlew also had a very good career at IU where he totaled sacks in the double digits as well. So Curlew and Middleton, they get me the sacks. Tracy Porter gets me the picks. They might leak a few points here and there, but all in all, I'm going to take the 07 defense here. And then when we snake around, These are some interesting picks. I mean, at the end of the day, though, I think my roster has been decided for me. I do get to decide on a kicker, though, and the 3 kickers available are Mitch Ewald, Logan Justice, and Griffin Oakes. Pretty interesting discussion there. Oakes has the leg. I remember him drilling that 57-yarder against Maryland.
Oh, I was there. It was amazing.
Yeah.
We were right before the half. It was because the marching band was because right on the field, we were behind it, and it was especially in a year of 2014 where nothing else was going on that year. We got this freshman kicker coming into that was a very memorable moment.
But at the same time, when I look at the numbers, ideally my offensive players go into the end zone and don't have to worry about field goals. But I'm going to take Mitch Ewald here. Ewald is a guy who kicked for 4 years at Indiana, and his accuracy is through the roof. I mean, you talk about a guy who nailed 80% of his kicks, made all but one of his 162 extra point attempts.
Yeah.
Give me Mitch Ewald. It's a great name too, just rolls right off the tongue. Give me Mitch Ewald, old number 16. He's going to be my kicker.
All right, before we get into my next pick, since I'll have actually a pick of kickers to talk about between Oakes and Justice, Matt, give us our social media shout out for the week.
Yeah, social media shout outs is going to be Indiana HQ because there hasn't been a lot really going on in the sports world this week. So follow us on Indiana HQ on Twitter and on Instagram. Check us out. Sorry, guys. There's not a lot going on. As you can see, we're waiting for sports to come back up. I'm sure we'll have more social media shout-outs once the NBA starts back up in Orlando in about a month because we got a bunch of IU players ready to play there, like Romeo Langford. I think he was on social media this week. There's a picture of the Celtics arriving in Orlando to start practicing as a team, and Romeo looks delighted to be there in the photo. So go check that out on Twitter under the IU basketball hashtag. But yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. Basically, since we've got only a couple positions and it's not a real fantasy draft where we can just kind of flex players in and out, more or less, I think the rest of all of our rosters are pretty set. So it's just going to be a discussion between maybe a couple positions. So like me, for a kicker, I have the choice between Griffin Oakes and Logan Justice, which is actually a lot closer than you might think because you look at the numbers. Logan Justice is relatively far below Oakes, but I mean, you think of the career Logan Justice had the first 2 years, he had the first 2 to 3 years he was on the team, he was sitting behind Griffin Oakes, who obviously was not going to be giving up his kicking job. So basically, Logan Justice had 2 years to get all the numbers he had, and he technically did have the highest field goal percentage. But I think I'm going to go with and you talk about field goal kickers kickers actually do get you a fair amount of points in fantasy draft a lot of weeks. So I'm going to go with the guy that kicks a lot of field goals. And like Nathan said, the guy that has a leg, which in most fantasy leagues get you more points if you can kick those 50-plus yards field goals. They might give you an extra point or two. I'm going to go with Griffin Oakes. He had that one really, really bad year. But I mean, if he can have a really bad year and still be the all-time kicker with 69 made field goals and most points for kickers, that is going to be my kicker off the board. So Matt, kind of clean up your team in your next couple of picks. I think that'll be it for you, correct?
This is going to be it for me. So I'm going to take the last viable tight end in Ted Bolser off the board. Ted played from Indiana from 2010 to 2013, had 1,300 total yards receiving and 15 touchdowns total. He had a year where his senior year, he had 6 touchdowns, and for a college tight end, that's pretty decent. So, Ted, thank you for your service. And then this last pick for wide receiver is a really interesting one, and I've been flipping in between a couple people. That's why you've been seeing me click through things, because I'm trying to go through people. I have deep into IU wide receivers now. So Tandon Doss I think is my choice, or was going to be my choice.
You're gonna go past Nick Westbrook?
Wait a minute. I thought it was my choice. Then I was thinking about Nick Westbrook. And then I was like, you know what? I really need some heart and soul in my team. I need a sparky guy to come in and help me win the game. And I was like, God, who could this be? Who could do this for me? Who could be this man that comes in and helps me out so much? And I just lost the stats on him, and I hate everything. Is Mitchell Page.
Nice.
And so
I was about to guess your pick as Mitchell Page, actually.
I was looking for somebody who's going to catch a lot of balls and was going to be my slot receiver. So I'm going to go with Mitchell Page with my pick. I thought he was an excellent player on the 2016 and 2015 teams for IU. He hasn't made it in the NFL. I believe he was on the Chargers roster last, if I am correct. But he had 1,100 yards total receiving for IU. He had over 100 receptions total for IU, and 8 touchdowns. Or no, and 10 touchdowns. Wow, ESPN needs to fix their thing. But yeah, I remember watching Mitchell Page at IU. I don't remember watching Tandon Doss, so I'm gonna go with my recency bias and go with Mitchell Page.
And the thing with Page too, I believe he had a throwing touchdown during his time at IU, a passing touchdown, I should say, and he's also a return threat, and you might get a little bonus punt return touchdown action if you get lucky. So I really like that. He had over 50 catches each of his 2 major years. So I really like that.
All right, my last pick that I have to do is a running back, and I mean, you could talk about a couple people, but really the only guy left from that specific era is going to be Divine Redding, and everyone remembers Divine Redding, but he actually had a lot better statistics than I even remembered from just even getting to watch him play for his 3 years. And he was there for 3 years. He still had 2,200 rushing yards total, which is 11th all-time on all of Indiana's football seasons. Again, in only 3 years, he had over 500 attempts, so he was still getting a lot of the carries, which is, again, when you were thinking of that Tevin Coleman into Jordan Howard type of years, still getting all those carries. And if he was the main guy, Jordan Howard was 15. Yeah, so if he was getting all the carries without Tevin Coleman in his first year, Jordan Howard in his second year, that's a guy that kind of is kind of like a sneaky player, basically, that can kind of come up on you and do a lot better. So I'm going to go with Divine Redding as my final pick. And Ari, that's it. I don't have any other. There's no more running backs. Ari in the chat was like, I'm not a big Redding fan. There was no one else. That's all of our picks at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is interesting, right? Like you could try to think of some other guys. I mean, D'Angelo Roberts, I don't think would have been, a big enough player here. Samson James, I think he's too young to make that pick right now. So really, when you look at the numbers, Redding, even if he wasn't the most glamorous running back, he's definitely somebody who'll get you your floor for your fantasy team, which is obviously going to be a real thing.
Hey, I still have Penix on my team too, so I have an extra running back.
Exactly. No, that's a good way to think about it. And I guess to round out the player selection process for the 2020 Hoosier Sound IU football fantasy draft, I'm going to take Kellan Lewis, and this is a guy who is someone I was mentioning a little bit earlier. Lewis is somebody who really tore it up when he was at IU. 3 years at quarterback, had almost 6,500 passing yards, and he was pretty dynamic in the running game as well, getting about 500 yards a year to total, I think it was 1,600. Yeah, he had about 1,600 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns, 48 passing. This is a guy who I can plug into my lineup, no sweat. And I know he's going to get me a double-digit fantasy total no matter what because of his ground game and the passing attack. So, Peyton Ramsey was really close, and it was neck and neck. And I just think maybe Kellan Lewis has a little bit more upside. Although, if I wanted to take Ramsey, I don't think anyone would have really argued that pick either. Kellan Lewis a little bit more dangerous on the ground, so I'm going to take him to round out the player selection process for our draft.
All right, and Nathan kind of said he's going to do this randomly. We actually don't even know what he's doing, because if we were thinking about putting a coach in the draft picks, but then we were thinking about adding it to the end, but then if you really add the coach in like a sequential order for picks, the coaching is going to kind of be obvious. So I don't even know if we're going to put this on social media or something later. But Nathan, kind of give us, you had a randomizer.
Oh, yeah.
I guess since I'm the guy posting on social media, basically if I get one of the better coaches is probably if it's going to go on social media or not. But Nathan, you had some way of giving us three, because there are three coaches since the Bill Lynch era. So who's getting what coach?
All right, here we go. I have run the numbers in the behind the scenes Excel spreadsheet.
That Matt and I have no idea what went into these numbers.
Nope, you have no idea.
You could have just picked these for random.
That's
people,
right.
So.
That's right. So the coaches have been assigned as follows. All right. I unfortunately landed with Bill Lynch.
Yes.
All right. Unfortunately,
now we at least have someone.
I mean, look, I loved his gum throwing ability. He was awesome at that. I love his personality. He's a guy, you could really get behind him. And I think in 2020, he would be somebody that my football team could really get behind. So Bill Lynch is my leader.
Nice spin zone. Nice spin zone.
It's like yourself.
I believe.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that's right. So
right,
Noah.
Nathan, so who's getting Tom Allen? Is the better question.
The person who ends up with Tom Allen is Matt.
Yes.
There you go.
Matt ended up with Tom Allen. The Excel spreadsheet felt that he just, I don't know. I mean, each of us had a 1/3 shot at these guys. And, Matt, today's your lucky day. Hopefully your luck doesn't run out in case you decide to go gamble somewhere. Hopefully this isn't it.
Buy a lottery ticket tonight.
Tom Allen's your guy, and Noah, you're left with Kevin Wilson.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not too bad. I mean, he still did a lot with the program and turning it around. So that's what I'm going to put. And he was an offensive guy, which I've got some offensive players too. And I've got I've got Tom Allen on defense for defensive coordinating stuff. So, all right. So the rosters are as follows: Nathan, QBs Kellan Lewis, his running backs Tevin Coleman, and Stephen Houston, wide receiver Shane Wynn, Cody Latimer. Those probably going to be the two popular picks. Tight end Peyton Hendershot, kicker Mitch Ewald, and your defense as the 2007 defense, and your coach is Bill Lynch. My picks, QB was Michael Penix, running backs Jordan Howard, Divine Redding, wide receiver James Hardie and Watt Fillier, tight end Ian Thomas, kicker Griffin Oakes, defense the past season with the 2019 defense. Then Coach Wilson as my coach, and then Matt has QB Nate Sudfeld, running back Marcus Thigpen and Stevie Scott, wide receivers Simi Cobbs, Mitchell Page, tight end Ted Bolster, and kicker Austin Starr with the 2017 defense, and the one and only Tom Allen as his head coach. And I mean, we could probably debate a lot about which team would probably end up winning. I don't know, Matt. I kind of, and obviously we're going to like our own teams, but I really like my own team. I've got Penix and Howard and James Hardie on it with Ian Thomas and Griffin Oakes and a good defense. I mean, Matt, you've got okay wide receivers, really, and an okay tight end. I mean, I don't really have...
My QB is going to make up for it. Nate Sudfeld's accurate. I got two great running backs in the backfield, and I got a better coach than both of you combined.
That's true.
I mean, hey,
Nathan, Nathan, are you advertising for your own team or not?
I think we got to let the fans decide. That's what I think.
That's fair.
That's what we got to do. But hey, I mean, if we're going full PPR, I'm loving my team. Stephen Houston's going to get some. Shane Wynn loads up on the receptions there. Peyton Hendershot was excellent. And I got Kellan Lewis scampering around getting me rushing yards. So
I got Mitchell Page. So
I'm also shouting out my 07 defense. They're going to get sacks and picks when they face the fantasy world Purdue or whoever these teams are playing. So no, I like my team. Look, like I said, Bill Lynch, emotional leader. he's going to fire up the team as we go into battle every week.
And we're not including, so Ari, he was talking about obviously Terry Hapner, and we're not including him as a coach because he was talking about having him as that would have changed the coaching aspect as well. So what do you guys think? Make sure you go on to Twitter and vote. We're going to make it a specific poll, so it's pretty easy for you guys. Ari in the chat loving all of his comments. He's even saying it's hard to say that you guys all have a mix of the best players, so I guess we're going to have to see what you guys have. But yeah, that is going to be our fantasy draft of the Bill Lynch era. Let us know if you guys like that, and hopefully it gets you excited for some football action happening in just about 3 months. Make sure, so that's going to wrap it up for 145th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to the live audience. So thank you to people like Ravi and Ari for coming out. We really appreciate your support. News and updates come through Twitter, so subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly episodes. But most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, Apple Podcast, Facebook, tell a friend, share our links. Your support is really how we grow this podcast so we can reach all those passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.